Hi, thank you for joining my first YouTube live stream. I wanted to take everyone through some of the headlines that's been going on in the cybersecurity world over the last few weeks, and also go through some hints and tips, some of the things that I cover in my presentations, such as how a hacker will steal your information and your passwords. But we're going to start with what's on screen at the moment. So you can see Travelex, who have been out of action when it comes to global. They've had a global cybersecurity outage, which was due to a ransomware attack. And this actually happened on New Year's Eve. So it's the 17th of January now, and they've been almost completely out of action since then. So we need to look at two things that have happened here in this case. Firstly, I'm led to believe that a lack of updates on their systems and keeping things updated hindered them and left them vulnerable to attack. And also, with 17 days past, they're still not back up and running fully, which suggests that the disaster recovery and the business continuity plan that Travelex had in place didn't seem sufficient to deal with the level of risk and the need to get back up and running quickly after a very serious incident like this. I also noticed that it took Travelex quite a few days to really openly come out with what had actually happened. For quite a few days, there was a down for maintenance screen on Travelex's main pages and on all of their servers. And again, I'm sure that from a GDPR perspective and from the Information Commissioner's Office, that won't be taken kindly when they're doing their reviews. So it's quite important to get cybersecurity right within the organization, and to be honest with your clients and anybody whose data that you may be processing, to make sure that the impact of any fine or penalties as a result of what's happened is minimized. And I'm sure that the issue with Travelex will go on long beyond when it's back up and running and everything's been rectified. So that's with Travelex. Anybody that's been following my posts recently on Facebook and LinkedIn will have also noticed a video that I did a couple of days ago regarding the two-factor authentication bypass technique. And I had a lot of interest and questions on that video that I produced. And so just to clarify a couple of points. So basically what I'm saying is two-factor authentication, although it is very, very much a necessary step in protecting yourself from hackers and the potential of a hacker stealing your password and gaining access to your account, it won't protect you from a very sophisticated attack, such as the one that I demonstrated. With that particular technique, what I'm able to do is not only steal the username and password for the individual, but I was able to steal their session. And so when you're on Facebook, LinkedIn, or any other website or application, what you'll notice is that you can stay on that page and you can stay logged in for several days, sometimes weeks, without needing to sign in again. And the reason that works is that your web browser retains a cookie, and these aren't, the type you get from Millis. This is just a small text file on your computer that basically says that you've already authenticated. And whilever that information sat on your computer, you will stay connected to Facebook, LinkedIn, Google. And if an attacker is able to steal that information from you, then they assume your session. So they don't need your username or password to sign in, because by rights you've already authenticated, and that is what that technique demonstrated, and how easily it can be done for somebody to hijack your session and continue to use your login. So definitely enable two-factor authentication. I'm not saying not to do that, but the big thing here is that user education is one of the most important factors. If you're capable of spotting a phishing email, something that's trying to get you to click on a link and to do something, then you're more likely to detect these potential risks. And so At Reformed IT, one of our strategies is that we ensure that every single customer that we look after and we support, that they get that user education and that training built in. It doesn't cost any extra. We just want to make sure that all of our clients have the best tools and knowledge to keep them safe and secure. So I'm going to move on to cover a presentation. We've basically come up with a PDF, a hints and tips security guide, to cover all of the things that we would recommend that you do to help stay secure, and so that you understand what techniques the hackers are using to try and break into your accounts and steal your information. So I'm going to cover a few of those now. And as I've just mentioned, one of the common techniques that hackers will use to try and gain access to your accounts, to steal your usernames and passwords, and maybe influence you to do something else, is phishing. So phishing is where a hacker sends out an email, typically to a large number of recipients. Some of the common examples we've got on screen there are TV licensing renewals. We see them quite a lot coming through. HMRC tax refunds, that'll be very prevalent in the next month or so, saying that you're owed some tax back. Click this link to fill out your details. You get a lot of those. And the classics that go back several years now are delivery shipping notifications. So where you get an email with a tracking attachment or a tracking link. And scan to email. We see that a lot in the business world as well. So with those, it will be an email that comes in with an attachment. It will suggest it's been scanned by a copier or a scanning device on the network. It will be fairly generic. And again, the idea is to try and get you to click and run the attachments. But generally, with the old school style phishing techniques, they're very generic. They're sent to lots of people at the same time, and they won't generally use individual details like your name or anything specific to you. And the idea with a phishing email is for them to be sent to lots of people, and some people get caught in. So some people believe it, they click the link, or they run the attachment, and they're just hoping for a few people to do that. However, there is also something known as spear phishing, and spear phishing is different to phishing in the sense that it's much more targeted and direct. In a spear phishing attack, the email will be addressed to you individually. So they'll know your name, they'll know where you work, they'll know who your manager is, what you're responsible for, and quite often we're seeing techniques where something called CEO fraud. That's where they'll send an email pretending to be the CEO or the MD of a business to somebody in the accounts department, for example, asking for an invoice to be paid or money to be transferred. And we've seen cases of this where, say, for example, an out of office has been received from a managing director of a firm, and they've used that information then to send an email into the PA or the accounts department, saying there's an acquisition happening with the company. We're trying to buy another company out. We need some money transferred to this account quickly. It needs to be done today, but it also needs to be confidential because we don't want any news of this takeover happening in the public eye. So do this sensitively, but do it urgently. And as you know, I'm on holiday at the moment, so I'm not really able to respond to your emails. So can you just make sure this gets done quickly? That kind of pressure to do something urgently is usually a red flag. It's an indicator, but that's what the attackers will do. They'll try and wrap it up to make there some urgency and to make it sound believable as well. So where do the hackers get this information from? Well, a lot of information is online now. So you've got LinkedIn accounts, Facebook accounts, Twitter accounts. A lot of websites have Meet the Team pages, and Meet the Team pages will have a lot of information about the structure of the business and who's responsible for which department. So it's quite easy for this information to be collected. And where it gets even worse is when a hacker does actually breach a company and gets access to some sensitive information, such as somebody's email account. And if they can gain access to an email account, they can then look for things like invoices that have been sent out. And if they're able to find invoices that have been sent to customers, they can then go and reword those invoices, change bank details, and as it's a genuine invoice, that is much more believable and more likely to get paid. We, as Reformed IT, we have a platform for cyber awareness training, which is under the banner of KnowBe4. KnowBe4 are one of the market leaders globally for cybersecurity training and phishing testing. So one of the things that we do is we provide that user education and user training. But from what you can see on screen, there are usually some red flags, some indicators that an email is phishing. So you're looking for things like the address and who it's come from, that sense of urgency in the email. The obvious one that you should always look at is links, and even though the link may say one thing, if you hover over that with your mouse, you will see the actual location that link will take you to. So these are the things to be careful of and to keep an eye on. And if you want to pause this video at this point, you can go through all of the red flags that are covered on screen at the moment. So then we move on to what's known as smishing or SMS phishing. So this is very similar to an email phishing attack, but it's done over text message. And this is becoming increasingly prevalent nowadays. So because of the vast increase of smartphone devices and the likelihood that people are using their phones quite a lot while they're out and about, an SMS type phishing attack can be sent and somebody can follow the URL and still get a full web page interface, and they could be putting information in there. The other thing that can be done over SMS is to try and get responses to find out more information. So for example, you might get a text message from a delivery company saying, we've got a delivery at this time, will you be in, yes, no, to try and indicate whether you're at a certain premise at a certain time as well. So phishing by SMS and text messages is increasingly popular, and it's something to bear in mind that they can spoof the telephone numbers. So even if it looks like it's from somebody that you know, just like emails and phishing emails, that might not be entirely true. So you have to be semi-paranoid about anything you get electronically. And then there's vishing, which is voice phishing. And this is where the attackers, rather than sending you anything by email or by text, they actually call up. And quite often you can get automated phone calls where it will call up and it will say something like, this is the HMRC, we know that you're due a tax refund, can you press 1 to confirm that you'd want to process this request, and then they start to try and gather more information from you as well. Not as popular as the other techniques, but it is something again that's on the rise. And so social engineering is a general term for a lot of techniques, and the examples that we've just given regarding phishing, spear phishing, vishing, and SMS phishing, they are all types of social engineering attacks. But there are things that can be done in person as well. So we talk about things like tailgating. So somebody walking into a building and gaining access to a physical building just by following somebody in. And quite often you can dress this up in different ways. So delivery, as you can see on screen on the image. So delivery drivers, for example, you could be dressed up in an outfit that says DPD and holding a few boxes. And naturally, people's own wishes to be courteous will hold the door open for somebody to walk in. But this can be done in other ways as well. This could be, let's say somebody dresses up in a BT polo shirt and turns up at the building and says there's an issue with the phone lines or internet in the local area. Can we take a look at your router and where your cables come in, because we just need to make sure everything's okay. That person then gets led probably into your area where all of your critical infrastructure of the business is. So your main internet connection, maybe some servers and data servers sit, and potentially somebody whilst in that location could plug in a device or could try and take some information or photos as to exactly what you're using to build that up for an attack remotely later on. So generally, our advice on this is to be vigilant, obviously, in the workplace. Keep your eyes open, and not, this isn't for people to lose their element of politeness, but if somebody says that they're somebody and they need to do something within the building, is to ask questions of that individual. So who arranged for you to be there? Can I get some ID? What exactly do you know about this situation? So it's to politely ask questions to try and ensure that that person is who they say they are. So one demonstration that I do quite frequently is I use a device known as a Wi-Fi Pineapple, which you can also see on the image on screen. And this can be used to spoof Wi-Fi networks. So I do a demonstration and an example where I pretend to be a Premier Inn hotel, and I could generally get people to connect to my Wi-Fi, my spoofed Wi-Fi. And when they're connected to there, they could be putting in information in like an email address and password. They could even be putting in credit card information. And once they've put that credit card information to get access to premium Wi-Fi, for example, I'm then able to capture all of that information in plain text and use it. So you've got to be really careful when you're out and about and you're using public or free Wi-Fi. The best tip for that is to stick to mobile data. Nowadays, most mobile phone contracts include lots of mobile data, sometimes unlimited data. And if it's not your own trusted Wi-Fi network, then just stick to mobile data. If you desperately need Wi-Fi because you can't get any mobile data signal, then just use it cautiously. Don't be putting information in or personal information in whilst you're connected to it. And also try and use a VPN device on the mobile phone when you're on any public network. So you can download apps to do this online. One of the things I've noticed recently is the Speed Test app on your mobile, which is quite good for testing the speed of your internet connection. I've also introduced a VPN technology within that app as well, so you can take a look at that. And we're going to move on to like keyloggers. So a keylogger is a device that sits between a keyboard and your computer, and it can then keep a track of every single key press that's being entered on the keyboard to be retrieved by the hacker later. And what's worse is there are now Wi-Fi keyloggers, so this information could even be emailed to the attacker or sent remotely, wirelessly. So they don't even need to go back and retrieve the physical device. The danger of this is if somebody can get physical access to a building, let's say a meeting room, and they're able to very quickly, less than 10 seconds, plug in a keylogger into the computer, then that's such an easy way for them to start stealing usernames, passwords, and other information that gets entered onto that machine. So keep your eyes open in public areas. Make sure that public areas within the workplace, and also make sure that any computers that are in areas that guests and other people have access to, that they're locked away and kept out of the view of the general public. And then on to a device called a rubber ducky. So there's a great story that I've got about the rubber ducky. And this device, as you can see, it looks very much like a USB pen drive, but in fact, it's a keyboard. It's a scripted keyboard. So what that means is that we could basically tell that device to run a series of key presses incredibly quickly. And with specialist IT knowledge, you're able to almost program the computer to do certain things. So the best example we have for that is we scripted a device like the one shown on screen to steal all the usernames and passwords that are stored within a web browser and send them to a remote server. And all of that can be done in less than 5 seconds. And the great story is that part of the security team that I've run in the past, we have these devices available to us, and one of the security team actually had it attached to his keyring. He went out one day, lost his keys, and because the rubber ducky device was connected to his keyring. We were then able to look on the server, and we realized that somebody had actually plugged this device into their computer. It inadvertently revealed all of his usernames and passwords onto our hacking server, and we were then able to identify the person that had the keys and got the keys back. We also gave him a bit of a lesson on plugging random devices that he finds in the street into his computer. But that's the thing, don't just go and pick up any USB drive or USB pen drive that you find and start plugging it into your machine, because that could be very risky. And even if you've got antivirus on your computer, this device quite often doesn't get detected by antivirus, because even though it looks like a USB pen drive, it's not, it's just a keyboard. So a keyboard is allowed to be plugged into your computer, and it's allowed to type keys in the exact same way that this device does. By the way, if there's any questions from anyone at any point, feel free to pop those into the chat as well. So shoulder surfing, this is one of my favorite things to talk about in my presentations. So often I travel on trains a lot, and you could be doing meetings and quick discussions in coffee shops. A lot of people in business now meet in these kind of communal areas, and they have a chat. And if you get your laptop out or your tablet and you start to do some work, maybe catch up on some emails, you really need to pay attention to who else is around, because our natural instinct is to be very trusting of everybody that's around us, but you don't know if the people that are around are, whether they've got any ill intentions. So, for example, if a number of times that I've been traveling on a train to London from Nottingham, for example, and I see people get their laptops out, they open the lid, and you know that within the next 30 seconds to a minute, they're going to be typing in their password to gain access to the system. And they're also probably going to open up some web pages, some emails, and then start logging into those types of applications as well. Now, everybody's got a mobile phone in the pocket with high definition cameras, and they're able to zoom on these things as well. The latest iPhone's got a 3x optical zoom. And if they're able to zoom in and look at your screen, then they could easily capture any key presses and applications, even credit card information, as people are trying to buy things while they're on their commute. And all of that information can get captured by an individual and then used later on. And they can go through frame by frame and identify exactly what your password is. So you have to be really mindful of what's going on around you. But as well as that, there's also the capability for high-powered zoom cameras to capture information from great distances. So here we've got an example of this is using my own Nikon Coolpix P900 camera. It has high-powered zoom, and you can see in that image how we can zoom straight into an office across the block. This was taken in Manhattan, and we're able to pretty much read somebody's email from quite far away. So the obvious thing here is that you've got somebody in an office block with a window behind them. They've walked away from their machine, they've not locked it, and the screens are facing straight outside the window. But if we were to turn that desk around, and we'd only be able to see the back of the monitors. So some of these things people don't even think about unless it's brought to their attention, and it's only simple little techniques like moving the desk around or adding privacy glass that would actually stop a hacker from being able to steal that information. One of the common things that we're seeing now as well is that hackers are finding information out about password breaches through old breaches. LinkedIn had a major breach back in 2012, and a lot of your passwords that were stolen from there are being used by people today. So people who haven't decided to change passwords, make their password stronger, and they've kept the same one for years or something similar, they're at huge risk, because those passwords are all floating about on the internet for anybody to download. And if we're able to try those same passwords again, we might be able to find that we can log into your LinkedIn account, your Google account, your Facebook account, just by generally repeating old passwords that you're still using. If you want to find out if you've suffered a password breach, there's a link that I'll put in the comments, which is haveibeenpawned.com, and that will give you an indication of the of whether any of your passwords have been stolen and which one. If I just can't get onto that, so but I'll put that in the notes. And then there's the dictionary password attack. So this is basically where millions of passwords are then attempted against your account to see if it matches. So this can be done offline, it can be done by high-powered computers, and it doesn't actually take that long. In fact, in a previous case where we were given 1,400 users to try and crack the passwords on, 700, so 50% of all of these passwords were cracked in less than 2 minutes using this technique. So it just goes to show how quickly and easily basic passwords can be stolen. And when I'm saying basic passwords, we were cracking passwords that were 14 characters long. They had uppercase, they had lowercase, they had numbers, they had symbols. So one of the pieces of advice that I often give as well is to try and ensure that your passwords are at least 14 characters long. And try to have passwords that aren't based on any kind of word. You know, you can see on screen from the image, you know, using summer with a $ at the front is not making it more secure, because it's still based on a known word. And it only takes computers a fraction of a second to try an S, a $, a 5 instead, and they know that the techniques that humans are using with substitutions, letter substitutions, and they'll apply the same techniques to the cracking. And if they can't get your password through any of those other means, then they may just try to brute force the password. What that means is that the hacker will not manually, but with a very fast computer, will try and they'll try every single possible combination of letters, numbers, symbols. But the longer the characters, the longer the password, the harder that becomes, because it means exponentially multiplying the number of character sets up. So the longer the password is, the better it is from a brute force cracking technique. But also you need to bear in mind that you don't want it based on a dictionary word, because of the previous attack that we've just spoken about. So yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to cover today. I wanted to bring up to date with, you know, the news on the Travelex, talk about some hints and tips as to how people can steal your password. One of the other things just to mention that's been this week, so it's January the 17th of 2020, and this week there's been another major vulnerability announced within Windows 10 and Windows Server 2016 and Server 2019. This has been something that the NSA have detected and have reported to Microsoft. And if you remember back a few years when there was a big ransomware attack that was quite substantial, hurt the NHS. That was called WannaCry, that particular attack, that ransomware. That did so much damage, and it was only on reflection afterwards that it became obvious that if the NHS have actually patched their systems when the security updates were released, then they would never have really suffered that amount of damage. So we're in a similar situation here. There's been an update that's been released. It's a real crucial update because the exploits are already out there in the wild. So hackers are already taking advantage of this vulnerability, which means that there could be another wide-scale attack on organizations. In fact, we do already know of a few businesses that have been exploited using these techniques, and we're talking about an update and a vulnerability that's only been announced this week. So it's only going to get worse. That's why it's really imperative that Windows security updates and patches are applied as soon as they're released, because as soon as that's been released, the hackers are working ways to exploit it. So make sure you patch, make sure you keep updated, and that would do you well. So I'm Joe the Hacker. I do a lot of security presentations for businesses and banks. So if you need somebody to come into the organization and talk about security and make it obvious to your employees regarding what the possibilities are for hackers and how easy it is for hackers to break in, that tends to change people's mindsets and gets people thinking about security a little bit more. Also, if you need help implementing security techniques and implementing methods to try and keep the bad guys out, that's what we do at Reformed IT as well. Hopefully that's been useful to you. Please feel free to mention any questions in the comments, and that's me for now. Thank you.